They were worshipped on screen, applauded on red carpets, and idolized by millions. To the world, they were immortal, untouchable, glittering gods of fame. But beneath the designer suits and perfect smiles, some of Hollywood's brightest stars were hiding secrets so dark even the tabloids flinched. This is not a story about scandal. This is a story about crime. From Oscar winners to action heroes, from pop culture icons to beloved sitcom stars, these 25 celebrities walked into courtrooms as Hollywood royalty and walked out in chains. And the most shocking part? Some of them are still on your screen. Fin 1. Tim Allen, from Cocaine Mule to Comedy King. Before the sitcom empire, before the Pixar paychecks, before America knew him as the voice of Buzz Lightyear, Tim Allen was standing in a Michigan airport with a duffel bag full of over 650 grams of cocaine. It was October 1978. Allen wasn't famous. He wasn't funny. He was just a struggling 25-year-old with a drug habit and a dangerous side hustle. Caught in a DA sting operation, he was charged with trafficking, a federal crime that could have landed him life behind bars. But Tim Allen made a choice. He flipped. He cooperated with prosecutors and provided the names of over 20 other dealers, a decision that would define him forever in certain circles. In exchange, his sentence was reduced to 3 to 7 years. He ended up serving 2 years and 4 months in the Federal Correctional Institution in Sandstone, Minnesota. While inside, Allen observed everything: fellow inmates, guard routines, the absurdity of prison life. He later admitted that this period sharpened both his wit and his survival instinct. By the time he walked out of prison in 1981, he wasn't just free, he was reborn. Stand-up comedy became his salvation. By the 1990s, he was one of the highest-paid stars on television, with Home Improvement, headlining blockbuster comedies, and voicing one of the most iconic characters in animation history. But that mugshot? It still follows him. And the unspoken truth remains. One wrong move in 1978, and we never would have heard the words "to infinity and beyond." Fin 2. Danny Trejo, San Quentin's nightmare turned Hollywood's toughest hero. He's the face of 1,000 villains, the scarred enforcer, the prison tattoo made flesh. But before Danny Trejo was a Hollywood tough guy, he was a real one, and not the kind that walked away at the end of a movie. Trejo was born into violence. Raised in a brutal East LA neighborhood, he was doing heroin by 12, robbing stores by 14, and facing felony charges before he could drive. His youth wasn't just troubled, it was criminal. During the 1960s and early 70s, Trejo rotated through California's most notorious prisons: Soledad, Folsom, and San Quentin. At San Quentin, he became the lightweight and welterweight boxing champion. But inside those walls, fists weren't enough. He witnessed stabbings, riots, and suicides. Every day was survival. In 1968, after a botched drug deal and a near-fatal riot, Trejo faced a possible death sentence. But instead of dying in prison, he found redemption. He joined a 12-step program, got clean, and when he got out, he didn't chase money. He chased sobriety and helped others do the same. Then came the twist Hollywood couldn't write. In 1985, while working as a drug counselor on a film set, someone noticed his intensity, his scars, his presence. He was offered a role as a convict in Runaway Train. It was the first of over 400 film and TV appearances. Trejo didn't just survive prison. He weaponized it, turned the trauma into authenticity. Every role he plays carries the weight of truth and a silent warning. He's been to the real place. Behind the glare of the camera, he still runs recovery centers and feeds hundreds through his taco chain. But he'll be the first to tell you, if he hadn't gotten clean, he'd be dead or doing life. Fin 3. Robert Downey Jr., Hollywood's golden son who fell into darkness. There was a time when Robert Downey Jr. wasn't Iron Man. He wasn't a comeback story. He was a public disaster, a tabloid regular, and a walking cautionary tale. His descent wasn't just spectacular, it was televised. Downey was born into Hollywood royalty. His father, a filmmaker. His mother, an actress. And drugs? They were part of the scenery. He once confessed he was given marijuana at age 6. By his 20s, he was starring in Critical Darlings. But by his 30s, he was addicted to heroin, cocaine, and alcohol, drifting from rehab to relapse. The arrests began in 1996, first for possession of heroin, crack, and an unloaded .357 Magnum. Then came the infamous incident. Downey wandered into a neighbor's house and passed out in a child's bed. He was given probation, ordered to rehab, and then violated probation again and again. In 1999, the court had enough. He was sentenced to 3 years in California's state prison system. He served roughly a year in California Substance Abuse Treatment Facility in Corcoran, a stark place far from the world of premieres and press tours. In prison, Downey described the experience as like being sent to a distant planet. He was broken, exhausted, and still fighting demons. Even after release, he struggled. Studios wouldn't insure him. Agents stopped calling. At one point, he was considered unhireable. Then, in 2003, something shifted. He got clean, for real, took small roles, rebuilt trust. And in 2008, Marvel took a gamble. Iron Man was born, and so was the second life of Robert Downey Jr. But the prison record never left, nor did the years lost to addiction and self-destruction. He didn't just claw his way back to stardom. He escaped the abyss with bars still echoing behind him. 4. Wesley Snipes, the vampire slayer who couldn't outrun the IRS. He played warriors, rebels, and the legendary vampire hunter Blade. But in real life, Wesley Snipes met his match, not in a sword fight, but in a courtroom. For years, Snipes was riding high. He was a box office powerhouse in the 90s, effortlessly switching between action and prestige roles. But behind the scenes, he had stopped doing something far simpler than performing stunts: filing tax returns. Between 1999 and 2004, Snipes didn't pay a cent in federal income tax. The IRS estimated his unpaid taxes at over $7 million. In 2006, he was indicted on charges of tax evasion and conspiracy. The defense? Snipes claimed he believed he wasn't legally required to pay, an argument pushed by a fringe anti-tax group he had aligned with. The government didn't buy it. In 2008, Snipes was convicted on 3 misdemeanor counts of willfully failing to file tax returns. The sentence, 3 years in federal prison, the maximum allowed. He was sent to Federal Correctional Institution McKean in Pennsylvania. There, the man who once saved the world from vampires spent 845 days behind razor wire, stripped of fame and fortune. No private trailer, no fan mail, just time and lots of it. Released in 2013, Snipes tried to restart his career, but the fire never quite returned. His time away had cost him not just roles, but reputation. In Hollywood, disappearing for years, especially behind bars, can be a death sentence. Snipes didn't vanish because of a scandal. He vanished because he believed he could outsmart the system. But in the end, even Blade couldn't dodge the IRS. Mark Wahlberg, from hate crimes to Hollywood redemption. Today, he's a global star, a respected producer, a man of faith. But rewind to 1988, and Mark Wahlberg was a 16-year-old high school dropout, roaming the streets of Boston, high on drugs, burning with rage, and ready to destroy anything in his path. That spring, Wahlberg approached a middle-aged Vietnamese man, struck him in the head with a 5-foot wooden stick, and hurled racial slurs as the man collapsed unconscious. Minutes later, Wahlberg assaulted another Vietnamese immigrant, punching him in the eye so violently that the victim lost vision permanently. He was arrested and charged with attempted murder, later downgraded to felony assault. The judge didn't mince words. This wasn't juvenile stupidity. This was hate-fueled violence. Wahlberg was sentenced to 2 years in prison and served 45 days at Deer Island House of Correction. He later claimed he didn't remember if his attack was racially motivated. But the court record is chilling. In addition to the assaults, he had a history of hurling bricks and racial slurs at schoolchildren, actions impossible to dismiss as random. After release, Wahlberg found salvation in music, then acting, then faith. He's since expressed remorse, though controversially, he once petitioned to have his record pardoned, sparking backlash from those who believed true redemption means living with your past, not erasing it. Mark Wahlberg is proof that people can change. But he's also a reminder that the foundation of fame is sometimes built on pain that never made the headlines. Fun 6. O.J. Simpson, from America's hero to a prison inmate with no way out. There was a time when O.J. Simpson was untouchable, a Heisman Trophy winner, NFL legend, movie star, charismatic, charming, and deeply embedded in American culture. But that all changed in 1994, when his ex-wife, Nicole Brown Simpson, and her friend Ron Goldman were found murdered outside her Brentwood home. the slow-speed white Bronco chase, the televised trial, the glove that didn't fit. The trial of the century ended with O.J. acquitted of murder, shocking a divided nation. But the legal system wasn't done with him yet. In 2007, Simpson walked into a Las Vegas hotel room, flanked by armed men, to retrieve sports memorabilia he claimed had been stolen from him. The confrontation turned into armed robbery and kidnapping. This time, there were no dream teams, no nationwide sympathy, no second chances. In 2008, he was convicted on 12 charges, including kidnapping, robbery, and conspiracy. The sentence, 33 years in prison with parole eligibility after 9. He served his time at Lovelock Correctional Center in Nevada, a far cry from the football fields and film sets he once ruled. In 2017, Simpson was granted parole. He walked free after 9 years behind bars, but the shadow of his past remains inescapable. The murder acquittal, the civil lawsuit that found him liable, the bizarre 2006 book, If I Did It, which many saw as a confession in disguise. Today, he lives quietly in Las Vegas. But O.J. Simpson is no longer a celebrity. He's a symbol of justice delayed, of fame corrupted, and of a fall so spectacular the world watched every frame. Fun 7, Phil Spector, the legendary producer who traded gold records for a life sentence. Phil Spector wasn't just a producer. He was a revolutionary, the architect behind the wall of sound, a man who shaped the very DNA of 1960s pop music. He worked with legends, the Beatles, Tina Turner, the Righteous Brothers. But for all his genius in the studio, his personal life was spiraling into paranoia, violence, and isolation. By the late 1990s, Spector had become a recluse. He wandered his California mansion with loaded guns, intimidating house guests and employees. Many who worked with him later admitted they were terrified of him. Then came the night of February 3, 2003. Actress Lana Clarkson, known for roles in cult films and as a hostess at the House of Blues, was found dead in Spector's home, shot in the mouth, slumped in a chair, her teeth scattered across the floor. Spector told his chauffeur, "I think I just killed somebody." He was arrested, tried, and after a mistrial, convicted in 2009 of second-degree murder. The sentence, 19 years to life in a California state prison. Phil Spector died behind bars in 2021 from COVID-19 complications. In the end, his genius was overshadowed, not by decline, but by the undeniable truth that he was no eccentric artist, but a killer in denial. Once hailed as the godfather of modern music, he died a convicted murderer, remembered less for melodies and more for a bullet that ended a young woman's life. Fin 8. R. Kelly, the fall of an R&B empire built on silence and fear. For decades, R. Kelly was a titan of R&B. His voice was silk. His hits were global. He penned chart toppers, inspired generations, and once performed at the opening ceremony of the Olympics. But beneath the music was a chilling reality, a decades-long pattern of abuse, manipulation, and control. Whispers began in the 1990s, accusations of inappropriate relationships with underage girls, the secret marriage to 15-year-old Aaliyah. Civil lawsuits settled quietly, but somehow he kept rising. When a tape surfaced in the early 2000s, allegedly showing him with a minor, he was charged with child pornography but acquitted in 2008. Many believed it was over. The world moved on. But the victims hadn't. In 2019, the docuseries Surviving R, Kelly ripped the curtain wide open. Women came forward, dozens of them, with stories of grooming, imprisonment, assault. Federal authorities acted swiftly. Kelly was arrested and indicted on racketeering, sex trafficking, and multiple counts of sexual exploitation of minors. In 2021, he was convicted in New York on 9 federal counts, including sexual exploitation of children and forced labor. The sentence, 30 years in prison. A second trial in Chicago brought more convictions and another 20-year sentence, 19 of which will run concurrently. Today, Kelly sits behind bars, his empire in ruins. His music pulled from playlists, his name synonymous not with seduction, but with systematic predation. He once asked the world, "Do you believe you can fly?" Now the answer is clear, not from a federal prison cell. Fin 9, Lauryn Hill, from Grammy glory to prison bars. In 1999, Lauryn Hill was on top of the world. Her album, The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, swept the Grammys. She was the voice of a generation, fusing soul, rap, and righteous anger into something sacred. But fame, she later said, felt like a trap, and in time she would walk away from it all. By the late 2000s, Hill had retreated from the spotlight. She claimed she was rejecting the commercial machine. But the IRS wasn't interested in her philosophy. Between 2005 and 2007, Hill earned over $1.8 million and failed to file any tax returns. When questioned, she admitted it. Her defense? She said she had withdrawn from society to protect her family, that she wasn't trying to evade the law, just survive outside the chaos. But federal courtrooms don't run on ideology. In 2013, Hill was sentenced to 3 months in federal prison for tax evasion, followed by 3 months of home confinement. She served her time at the Federal Correctional Institution in Danbury, Connecticut, the same prison that inspired Orange is the New Black. While inside, Hill reportedly kept a low profile. No special treatment, just routine, reflection, and silence. When she emerged, she returned to performing, but never reclaimed her former throne. Her mythos remained, but the industry had moved on. Still, she remains a symbol of both brilliance and defiance, a star who once conquered the world, then chose to burn the bridge behind her. Her voice remains unmatched, but so does the question. Was prison the punishment, or was fame? Fin 10. Martha Stewart, America's domestic queen behind federal walls. She was the face of perfection, crisp linens, immaculate centerpieces, the soothing voice that taught millions how to fold napkins like origami and roast the perfect holiday turkey. But in 2004, Martha Stewart, the queen of home and garden, traded her designer aprons for a prison-issued uniform. The crime? Insider trading. In 2001, Stewart sold nearly 4,000 shares of biotech company ImClone Systems just before the stock crashed. Federal investigators alleged she acted on non-public information, a stock tip from her broker indicating the company's CEO was dumping shares. Stewart denied wrongdoing, claiming she had a preset sell order. But the cover-up unraveled quickly. It wasn't just the trade, it was the lies she told to investigators and the pressure she placed on her broker to corroborate her story. The charges: conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and making false statements. The trial gripped the nation. Stewart's brand was built on trust and decorum. Watching her fall was like watching a porcelain vase shatter in slow motion. She was convicted and sentenced to 5 months in federal prison, followed by 5 months of house arrest. She served her time at the federal prison camp in Alderson, West Virginia, known as Camp Cupcake for its relatively relaxed conditions. But there was nothing sweet about the humiliation. And yet, Stewart emerged stronger. She rebuilt her empire, rebranded herself as a survivor, and even teamed up with unlikely figures like Snoop Dogg to reinvent her public persona. Martha Stewart didn't lose her kingdom. She simply remodeled it, with the scars still visible beneath the polish. Fin 11. Lil' Kim, the rap queen who refused to snitch and paid the price. She was hip-hop royalty, a fierce lyricist, a trailblazing female voice in a male-dominated industry. With platinum albums and chart-topping singles, Lil' Kim wasn't just a performer. She was a movement. But in 2005, the Queen Bee made headlines not for a verse, but for a felony conviction that sent her straight to prison. It began with a shootout. In 2001, outside a Manhattan radio station, members of Kim's entourage got into a violent confrontation with rival rappers. Guns were drawn, shots were fired. No one died, but the message was clear. This wasn't just beef, it was war. When the FBI investigated, they brought Lil' Kim before a grand jury. Under oath, she claimed she didn't know her associates were armed, claimed one man, who was clearly there, wasn't. But surveillance footage told a different story. The charge? Perjury and obstruction of justice. In court, Kim didn't back down. She said she was protecting her family. That in her world, loyalty mattered more than legality. The jury disagreed. She was convicted and sentenced to 1 year and 1 day in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. She served her time at Federal Detention Center in Philadelphia. While inside, Kim kept writing, kept planning, and when she emerged, she was met with applause, not because the crime was forgotten, but because the sentence had only solidified her legend. She didn't snitch. She didn't fold. She took her time and came back swinging. But behind the rhymes and designer shades, Lil' Kim carries a record, a criminal one. etched into the history of hip-hop. Not fin 12, Fatty Arbuckle, Hollywood's first scandal and a trial that destroyed a legend. Long before TMZ, long before Twitter, there was Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle, one of the highest-paid actors of the silent film era. With a rotund frame and a face that could make audiences erupt with laughter, Arbuckle helped define Hollywood's earliest days. But in 1921, he became the face of its first true scandal, one so dark it nearly destroyed the film industry itself. That Labor Day weekend, Arbuckle threw a lavish party at the St. Francis Hotel in San Francisco. Alcohol flowed freely, despite prohibition. Among the guests was aspiring actress Virginia Rappe. Hours later, she was found in agony, bruised, bleeding, and vomiting. 4 days later, she died from a ruptured bladder. The newspapers exploded. Rumors swirled that Arbuckle had raped her, crushed her with his weight, and covered up the evidence. The studios panicked. The public was outraged. He was arrested and charged with manslaughter. The trial that followed was a media circus, 3 trials to be exact. The first 2 ended in hung juries. The third, a full acquittal. The jury even issued a written apology. There was not the slightest proof to connect him in any way with the commission of a crime. But it didn't matter. Hollywood blacklisted him. His films were pulled from theaters. He was vilified in print and shunned by producers. The acquittal came too late. The damage was done. He tried to make a comeback under a pseudonym, directing under the name Will Be Good, but the spotlight never returned. In 1933, on the verge of a real return to acting, Roscoe Arbuckle died of a heart attack in his sleep. He was 46 years old. No prison bars, no sentence served. But for Fatty Arbuckle, his reputation was his prison, and it lasted a lifetime. Fin 13, Michael Jace, from TV cop to convicted killer. He played Officer Julian Lowe on The Shield, a conflicted but principled cop navigating the brutal streets of Los Angeles. In real life, Michael Jace also lived in Los Angeles, but behind closed doors, his life was unraveling in silence. And on one chilling night in 2014, the man who portrayed justice on screen became the center of a real-life murder case. It happened on May 19th. Jace's wife, April Jace, had just returned home from her son's baseball practice. Minutes later, she was dead, shot multiple times at close range, their 2 young children watching in horror. The motive? Prosecutors claimed jealousy. April was planning to leave him. Jace, in his rage, reportedly told her, "You like running so much? Then run to heaven." It was a calculated, intimate killing. He didn't flee. He called 911 himself and confessed. "I shot my wife," he told the operator. The audio was cold, flat, almost rehearsed. In 2016, after a brief trial, he was convicted of second-degree murder. The judge handed down a sentence of 40 years to life in state prison. No possibility of parole for decades. The industry was stunned. Colleagues who once praised his discipline and kindness were now revisiting every conversation, every sign they might have missed. Michael Jace's story isn't just about violence. It's about the chasm between public image and private reality. A man who spent years playing a righteous lawman was revealed to be, in the end, a murderer in plain sight. Today, he sits in California State Prison, inmate number AN5237, no longer an actor, just another number in a system he once pretended to enforce. Fin 14, Chris Brown, the superstar who couldn't escape his own temper. He was once hailed as the heir to Michael Jackson. With electrifying moves, a silky voice, and charisma to spare, Chris Brown rose to stardom as a teenager and seemed unstoppable. But fame couldn't fix what was broken inside, and in 2009, the world watched in horror as photos of Rihanna's bruised and bloodied face circled the globe. The beating wasn't just violent, it was savage. Rihanna, then his girlfriend, was left with a split lip, swelling, and bite marks. Brown turned himself in and was charged with felony assault. He pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 5 years probation, community service, and domestic violence counseling, but avoided prison. For a while. That leniency wouldn't last. Between 2011 and 2013, Brown was repeatedly accused of violating probation. Fights, tantrums, alleged assaults. Then, in 2014, while attending rehab for anger management, he was kicked out of the facility after breaking rules and making threats. The judge had had enough. Brown was ordered to serve 131 days in Los Angeles County Jail. He ultimately served 108 days due to overcrowding, But it marked a shift. No longer was he a troubled youth. He was a man with a record, 1 foot inside a revolving door of legal problems. Since then, Brown has continued to release music, tour, and maintain a loyal fan base. But the shadow of that night in 2009 and the string of incidents that followed have never truly left. He remains one of the most polarizing figures in modern pop culture. To some, a misunderstood genius. To others, an unrepentant abuser. But one thing is indisputable. Chris Brown's downfall wasn't due to the system. It was the consequence of choices he made again and again until the walls finally closed in. Fin 15. Suge Knight, the death row don who traded music for murder. In the 1990s, Suge Knight was the most feared man in the music business. As co-founder of Death Row Records, he helped launch the careers of Tupac Shakur, Dr. Dre, and Snoop Dogg. But Suge wasn't just a mogul. He was a menace. Known for intimidation, violence, and blood-stained boardroom tactics, his empire was built on both beats and brutality. Rumors followed him like a shadow. Assaults, death threats, possible links to unsolved murders. But it wasn't until 2015 that everything imploded. On camera. Knight showed up uninvited to the set of the NWA biopic Straight Outta Compton. After a heated argument, he got into his truck and ran over 2 men in a nearby parking lot, killing one, severely injuring the other. The entire incident was caught on security footage. It wasn't ambiguous. It wasn't theatrical. It was cold-blooded. He claimed it was self-defense. The prosecution saw it as murder. Facing the possibility of life behind bars, Knight ultimately accepted a plea deal in 2018, pleading no contest to voluntary manslaughter. The sentence, 28 years in state prison. Today, Suge Knight sits in R.J. Donovan Correctional Facility in California. He will be eligible for parole in 2037, when he'll be 72 years old. The man who once ruled West Coast hip-hop with an iron fist is now just inmate number BK4062, serving a sentence as long as the careers he helped build. His fall wasn't sudden. It was slow, inevitable, the result of years pushing the line until he finally crossed one he couldn't walk back from. Fin 16. Lilo, the rise, fall, and chaotic incarcerations of Lindsay Lohan. Once, Lindsay Lohan was America's sweetheart. A child star turned teen icon, she lit up screens in The Parent Trap, Freaky Friday, and Mean Girls. But as the cameras followed her from movie sets to red carpets, another story was brewing behind the scenes. A slow-motion collapse marked by addiction, chaos, and courtrooms. By 2007, Lohan was spiraling. She was arrested for driving under the influence, twice in the same year. Cocaine was found in her pocket. Her mugshots went viral. She missed court dates. She mocked probation. And slowly, the law stopped treating her like a celebrity and started treating her like a repeat offender. Between 2007 and 2011, Lohan was sentenced to jail multiple times for violating probation and failing to complete court-ordered rehab. Each stint was short. A few days here, a few weeks there, largely due to overcrowding in California's jails. But the message was clear. She was no longer untouchable. In 2010, after a tearful courtroom plea failed to sway the judge, Lohan was sentenced to 90 days in jail for violating probation in her DUI case. She served 14 days at the Century Regional Detention Facility in Linwood. A year later, she was back for theft. Lohan's time behind bars became a punchline, but for her, it was a nightmare. She once described jail as traumatizing and claimed it made her physically ill. Yet the behavior didn't stop. The industry distanced itself. Roles dried up, and though she's since claimed sobriety and staged multiple comebacks, her record remains a permanent stain, a reminder that no amount of talent can excuse years of reckless defiance. Lindsay Lohan didn't serve long sentences, but she served often, and each time another piece of her star image crumbled under the weight of her own undoing. Fin 17. DMX, a raw talent caught in a cycle of self-destruction. There was no voice like his. DMX didn't just rap, he roared, with a growl that cut through speakers and a truth-telling ferocity that made pain sound poetic. He rose from the streets of Yonkers to dominate late 90s hip-hop. But while his music told stories of demons and survival, behind the scenes, DMX was still living inside the storm. Throughout his life, Earl Simmons, his real name, was arrested over 30 times. Drug possession, animal cruelty, driving without a license, weapons charges, but it was tax fraud that finally landed him in federal prison. In 2017, DMX was indicted for concealing millions in income and avoiding $1.7 million in taxes. Prosecutors said he lived a cash lifestyle to hide money, even refusing to tape a reality show until producers paid him off the books. In court, he stood before the judge and said, "I'm not a greedy person. I'm a grown man with a lot of problems." The judge didn't disagree, but the law demanded accountability. In 2018, he was sentenced to 1 year in federal prison, serving time at Federal Correctional Institution in Gilmer, West Virginia. Upon release, he vowed to turn things around again. But DMX's life was a cycle he couldn't break. He fought addiction for decades, entered rehab countless times, and in 2021, he suffered a fatal overdose, dying at the age of 50. DMX's story isn't just a fall from grace. It's a portrait of trauma, pain, and raw honesty. A man who screamed for help in his lyrics but rarely received it in life. His time in prison was short, but the prison inside him lasted a lifetime. Fin 18. Shelly Malil, the comedic actor who turned violent in real life. Audiences remember him best for his quirky supporting role in The 40-Year-Old Virgin, a harmless, fast-talking coworker with a goofy charm. But in 2008, actor Shelly Malil went from comedy to horror when he committed a real-life act of violence so brutal it nearly cost a woman her life. The victim was Kendra Beebe, his ex-girlfriend. She had ended their relationship and by all accounts moved on. But Malil wasn't done. On the night of August 10th, he arrived uninvited at her San Marcos, California home. He found her on the patio, talking to another man. Without warning, he stabbed her 23 times, in the chest, in the back, in the face. As she crawled away, he returned and plunged the knife in again. Miraculously, she survived, barely. Malil was arrested 2 days later. In court, he claimed he had snapped, that he had not planned the attack, and that he was horrified by his actions. But the jury saw it differently. In 2010, he was convicted of attempted murder and assault with a deadly weapon. The sentence, life in prison with the possibility of parole after 12 years. He served just 8 years. In 2018, despite public outcry and the victims' protests, Malil was granted parole. He walked out of prison not as a forgotten character actor, but as a convicted attempted murderer who had mutilated a woman and still reclaimed freedom. Hollywood didn't welcome him back. No offers, no cameos. His name remains a chilling footnote, a reminder that even those who make us laugh can harbor terrifying rage beneath the surface. Fin 19. From child star to convicted killer. He played the adorable younger brother in Diary of a Wimpy Kid. He had a small but memorable role in Riverdale. To audiences, Ryan Grantham was just another fresh-faced Canadian actor with promise. But behind closed doors, he was unraveling, consumed by mental illness, isolation, and a plan that would shatter everything. On March 31st, 2020, the then 21-year-old shot his mother in the back of the head while she played piano in their British Columbia home. The act was cold, deliberate. He later filmed her lifeless body, confessing his crime on camera in a disturbing video later shown in court. What made it worse was what came next. Grantham packed his car with 3 guns, ammunition, and Molotov cocktails. His target? Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. He began driving east toward Ottawa, allegedly with the intent to commit an assassination. But somewhere along the way, he changed course and turned himself in to Vancouver police, still in possession of weapons and his confession tape. In court, prosecutors painted a portrait of a young man spiraling into psychosis, obsessed with violence and suicidal thoughts. He had written in his diary about killing others, including mass shootings. His defense did not dispute the facts, but asked for leniency due to his deteriorating mental state. In 2022, Ryan Grantham was sentenced to life in prison with no parole eligibility for 14 years after pleading guilty to second-degree murder. His name is now etched in infamy, not as a child star, but as a cautionary tale of unaddressed illness, quiet desperation, and the ultimate, irreversible act of violence. Once seen on family-friendly screens, Grantham now lives behind bars, his youthful charm replaced with the cold reality of a life defined by one horrific moment. Jared Fogle, from national spokesman to federal prisoner. He was once the face of a brand seen in every mall, airport, and commercial break. The man who claimed to have lost over 200 pounds by eating sandwiches, turned that personal story into a national campaign. He became a motivational speaker, a media darling, and an unlikely celebrity. But in 2015, the story took a dark and irreversible turn. Following a lengthy investigation, Fogel was arrested and later pleaded guilty to serious federal crimes related to illegally obtained material and unlawful conduct involving minors. The charges shocked the public, not just because of their severity, but because they stood in stark contrast to the wholesome image he had carefully cultivated. He was sentenced to 15 years and 8 months in federal prison, with no possibility of parole. His carefully built reputation collapsed overnight. Corporate sponsors cut ties. Organizations that once partnered with him disappeared from public view. The charity bearing his name was dissolved. Fogel was incarcerated at Federal Correctional Institution Inglewood in Colorado, where he remains to this day. His case became a national cautionary tale, not just about crime, but about the dangers of trusting celebrity without scrutiny. A public figure who once promoted positive change was revealed to be living a double life, one that ended in complete disgrace. He went from being the center of a feel-good success story to a permanent symbol of betrayal. Now, far from cameras and ad campaigns, Jared Fogel serves a sentence not just of time, but of irreparable legacy. Fin 21. Tommy Lee, the drummer who couldn't outrun his demons. As the wild heart of Mötley Crüe, Tommy Lee embodied the chaos of 1980s rock, hard partying, loud music, and total excess. But behind the drums and debauchery was a man who crossed a line that no encore could erase. In 1998, Lee was convicted of spousal abuse after assaulting his then-wife, actress Pamela Anderson, in front of their young children. According to court records, the attack left Anderson with visible injuries and trauma that shook their household. The incident wasn't just a private dispute, it was a violent offense that led to real consequences. Lee pleaded no contest and was sentenced to 6 months in Los Angeles County Jail. Behind bars, the larger-than-life rocker had no stage, no spotlight. Just time. Time to reflect. Time to confront who he had become. After his release, Lee publicly apologized and claimed to have entered a process of self-reflection. Still, his legal troubles didn't end there. In later years, he faced multiple arrests for public intoxication, altercations with paparazzi, and volatile behavior that followed him long after the guitars faded. But the 1998 conviction remains the most serious, a moment where fame, rage, and recklessness collided. Tommy Lee continues to tour and perform, his legacy tethered to both his musical achievements and the criminal record that once overshadowed them. He became a symbol not just of rock's excesses, but of the real-life consequences that follow when the line between stage persona and personal conduct disappears. His time in jail was short, but for many fans, that chapter forever altered the beat of his story. Fin 22. T.I. to federal prison. With chart-topping hits, Grammy wins, and a reputation as one of the South's most influential rappers, T.I., born Clifford Harris Jr., built an empire on swagger and survival. But in 2007, just as he was climbing to the peak of his career, a federal sting operation brought it all crashing down. On the eve of the BET Hip Hop Awards in Atlanta, T.I. sent his bodyguard to purchase machine guns and silencers, not knowing that the bodyguard had secretly become a cooperating informant. Federal agents arrested T.I. in a parking lot as he allegedly attempted to take possession of multiple illegal firearms, some of which were loaded and unregistered. The case was explosive, not just for what it involved, but because of who was involved: a chart-topping rapper with mainstream appeal, movie roles, and corporate deals. Prosecutors could have pursued a sentence of up to 10 years. But T.I. struck a deal. In 2008, he pleaded guilty to federal weapons charges and agreed to a unique arrangement: community service before incarceration. He spoke to thousands of teens about gun violence and personal responsibility. In 2009, he reported to Forest City Federal Correctional Institution in Arkansas to begin a 366-day sentence. He served approximately 7 months in prison and additional time in a halfway house. After release, T.I. resumed his career, penning a memoir and starring in his own reality show. He publicly embraced the second chance, though legal run-ins would continue to trail him in the years that followed. Still, his conviction marked a turning point, not just for him, but for the rap industry, which watched a superstar walk straight from the studio to a federal cell block. He once rapped about the trap, then he lived it. Fin 23, Shine, the rapper who took the fall for a nightclub shooting. In the late 1990s, Shine was poised to become the next big thing. Signed to Bad Boy Records, with a voice eerily reminiscent of the Notorious B.I.G., he had the backing of Sean P. Diddy Combs, the spotlight, and the sound. But one violent night inside a Manhattan nightclub changed everything. Forever. In December 1999, Shine, then only 21, was with Diddy and singer Jennifer Lopez at Club New York. A confrontation broke out. Words were exchanged. Then shots were fired. 3 people were injured, and chaos erupted. When the smoke cleared, Shine was the one holding the gun. He claimed self-defense. Prosecutors said otherwise. In court, he refused to shift blame to Diddy, despite intense media pressure. His silence was interpreted by some as loyalty, by others as naivety. Either way, it cost him his freedom. In 2001, Shine was convicted on 2 counts of assault, reckless endangerment, and criminal possession of a weapon. The sentence, 10 years in prison. He served nearly 9 years behind bars at various New York State facilities. While incarcerated, he became deeply religious, converted to Orthodox Judaism, and even changed his name to Moses Michael Levi Barrow. When he was released in 2009, he was immediately deported to his native Belize due to his non-citizen status. His career, once promising, had been derailed by nearly a decade behind bars. And yet, Shine's story didn't end in exile. In a twist no one saw coming, he entered politics, and by 2020, he was elected leader of the opposition in Belize's House of Representatives. From platinum dreams to prison walls to parliament, Shine's journey is as unlikely as it is unforgettable, a reminder that even behind bars, some still find a way to rise. Fin 24. Ezekiel Elliott, a career nearly derailed by off-field violence. Correction. Ezekiel Elliott has never served prison time, despite legal controversies. To maintain factual integrity and uphold your policy of no fiction or distortion, we'll replace this entry with a confirmed case. Fin 24. Richard Hatch, from reality TV's first winner to federal inmate. He outwitted, outplayed, and outlasted. In 2000, Richard Hatch became the very first winner of Survivor, America's breakout reality TV phenomenon. He walked away with the $1 million prize, shirtless and smug, a reality TV icon before the genre had even found its legs. But a few years later, Hatch would be fighting not for reward, but for freedom. The issue? Taxes. Despite being repeatedly warned by accountants and the IRS, Hatch failed to report his Survivor winnings and other income from subsequent media appearances on his tax returns. Federal prosecutors claimed he simply refused to pay, even after being offered opportunities to resolve the situation privately. In 2006, he was convicted of tax evasion and filing false tax returns. The judge saw through his excuses, especially his claim that CBS should have paid the taxes for him. The sentence: shot 51 months in federal prison. He served time at Federal Correctional Institution Morgantown in West Virginia. After release, Hatch briefly attempted a comeback on reality television, but never regained the spotlight he once basked in. In 2011, he was jailed again, this time for 9 months, for violating probation by failing to amend previous tax filings. Hatch's downfall was shocking, not because of violence or scandal, but because of sheer arrogance. He beat 15 other contestants on national TV, only to be taken down by the IRS. The man who once ruled a tropical island found himself trapped in a very different environment: steel bars and silence. Fin 25. Lane Garrison, from breakout star to cell block inmate. In 2005, Lane Garrison rose to fame as a supporting actor on the hit series Prison Break. Ironically, just a year later, he would be living out that title, not on screen, but in real life. The incident that changed everything occurred on December 2nd, 2006. Garrison, then 26, had attended a high school party, drinking heavily with teens before getting behind the wheel of his SUV. 3 passengers rode with him, all minors. One of them, 17-year-old Valid, never made it home. Traveling at nearly 60 miles per hour in a 35 miles per hour zone, Garrison lost control and crashed. Setien was killed. Toxicology reports showed Garrison's blood alcohol level was twice the legal limit, and traces of cocaine were found in his system. The public was stunned. Garrison, tearful and apologetic, pleaded guilty to vehicular manslaughter, DUI, and providing alcohol to minors. In court, he addressed the victim's family directly, taking full responsibility. The judge sentenced him to 40 months in state prison. He served his time at California Correctional Institution in Tehachapi, where he reportedly kept a low profile and participated in rehabilitation programs. But the guilt followed him. In interviews after his release, Garrison called the experience soul-crushing, a wake-up call that came far too late. Though he attempted a return to acting, his career never recovered. The label stuck. The damage, permanent. Garrison's story is a sobering end to our list. Not a hardened criminal, not a scandal seeker, but a young man whose reckless decision cost a life and destroyed his own future in the process. It's a reminder that prison doesn't just claim the wicked. Sometimes it takes the promising. The impulsive. The ones who never thought it would happen to them until it did.